So, one of my questions, I remember reading from some spiritual teacher, as we evolve, they phrased it as, we are able to learn and grow through more and more joyful experiences and fewer challenging or painful experiences. So I was thinking of that in regards to your teachings. So contrast creates expansion. But if I'm more and more often in the vortex as time goes on, and I'm drawing in more and more of that positive energy, then am I, or are we, is one able to regularly be expanding powerfully, but with less and less contrast needed? Does that make sense?
The question is a good question, and we understand the premise from which the earlier statement was made. But consider this. If you are not consciously aware of emotion and what it means, and you are not deliberately aware of the grid as we are describing it today, so you are observing and not observing deliberately, just observing, and things are getting bigger and bigger, so that you know what you don't want, and you know what you do want, and then you really know what you don't want, and then you really know what you do want, and then you really, really know what you don't want, and you really, really do not know what you do want.
Yeah.
Your ability to discern and feel that vibrational spread is whatever it is. So what we are suggesting, we'll make our statement first, and then we'll walk through it until you understand all the depths and levels of what we are meaning by it. Your ability to, everything is perceptual. So if you're not delicately focused on vibration and reaching for subtle improvements, then the larger vibration is necessary for you to understand. It's like it's bigger and bulkier and needs to be. It's a little bit like little children like to stack up bigger toys. They like to play with those big square colored blocks because they can manage them. And later they want Legos. And later they want itsy bitsy Legos. Where in the beginning, and who gets to decide? If you were watching someone new at the stacking process, taking pleasure from the bulkier blocks, or if you were watching someone more evolved in the stacking process and they're using more refined nuances or blocks, who gets to decide what the level of pleasure is? And if you are evaluating, as we always are, the perfection of a moment or the success of a moment by how it feels. So did that sort of make sense in relationship to the question? In other words, we would far rather that you have contrast in order to find discernment than contrast in order to find discernment. But once you've found the discernment, you will feel as much contrast in, as much emotion in small contrast as you earlier did in large contrast.
Okay.
So the premise of the question and answer are not quite valid with the laws of the universe as we know them to be. You see, You see what we're getting at?
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, we want you. What you really are reaching for is balance. If you are overwhelmed, then you want more peaceful life. But if you've got a really peaceful life, then you're bored and you want something more stimulating. And if you have too much that's stimulating, then you want a more peaceful life. But if you have too peaceful of a life, then you get bored and you want something that's more stimulating. And so this contrast is something that is always coming to you based upon what you've got going with your grid. Yes, you can become more deliberate, and yes, you will feel more satisfaction the more deliberate you become. This is a question that has been put to us many, many times over the years. This business of how deliberate am I supposed to be is the question. In the beginning, we began by saying you create your own reality and you are the attractor of your own experience. And so you want to be a deliberate creator. You want to think deliberately. And then later, as we visited with so many of you for a while who were who were now getting very deliberate about what you want, we began putting more emphasis on the allowing part of it, because you were identifying what you wanted, but you were not up to speed with what you wanted, and so you were creating more of a crevasse between where you were and what you wanted, which was uncomfortable. So then we began offering words to help you to close that gap. In fact, every process that we've ever offered, and there are hundreds of them in past, present, and future experience coming, that every process that we've ever offered is about closing that gap, which is sort of what this question was about. How much contrast do I need to endure is sort of the way the physical question comes. How much contrast do I need to endure in order to be the best deliberate creator that I can be? And we say, you get to choose all of it. And if the basis of your life is how good you feel, then you'll be able to work it out. You'll be able to figure it out. Everything all right?
Yeah, and I thought of a particular example, desiring an extraordinary partnership with a man. And so I can regularly watch those movies, for example, or the television shows where beautiful partnerships are being created and experienced. Or I can have more of my experience in being around, noticing or giving more attention to the couples that are fighting, regularly in conflict, right? That gives me an example of what I don't want, creating greater clarity for what I do want, or I can just regularly be tuning into what I do want, giving myself examples of what I directly want for myself.
We're going to visit with them. What's happening? You want us both to be in the same place? Only one camera is with? No point in wasting words on ears alone. Is the camera on us? Now? You can get us? All is well? So, how did that contrast feel? It wasn't significant?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Well, we're talking about what happened in the moment. So,
Oh.
How did the contrast feel? How does the no one here was particularly concerned about that. We imagined that the technicians involved felt the greatest contrast about all of that.
Yeah.
So
Right.
So how does that contrast feel? Now
Yeah.
they have a vibrational grid that says we can figure anything out.
Yeah.
They have a vibrational grid that says we can always figure out a way to do something. In other words, there's always a way to work it out. So nothing too unsettling happens in something like that. So we would call that experience small contrast, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you call that small contrast? And yet, isn't all contrast of value? In other words,
Absolutely.
it might make them, what would it make you do? What would it make you do? Relax. We're getting our microphone close to you.
Relax more. Relax.
What desire is born in a situation like that?
I've created a better grid.
But even though something happened, in other words, so you want to improve your grid, but what specific desire is born? Let's say if there is equipment failure, what desire does that establish within you?
No equipment.
And in the idea of no equipment failure, how does that grid then fill in?
I couldn't tell you. I'm focused on the equipment failures.
This is not an easy shot, is it? We've lost control. What we're getting at here
What's
is that
happening?
what we're getting at here is that when something occurs and you give your attention to it, like let's say there is equipment failure and you give your attention to it, it makes you desire to have more stable equipment. It makes you desire to have your setup. Esther and Mark had a conversation yesterday about a possible equipment change that would make some things simpler. And that conversation was not long, maybe 2 minutes, maybe. And together they established an emotional grid that just filled in a little. said it's my fault, but we say it's your credit. It's to your credit. In other words, everything is this way. This is really what we want you to understand. Everything that matters to you and everything that you give your attention to, everything that you're responding to, it's all filling in. You think things are just happening. Nothing is just happening. Nothing is randomly happening. Everything is happening in response to your grid. And so nothing bad happened here. In other words, nothing happened except more information comes, more thoughts about more things.
Right.
So now we'll go back to what we were talking to you about, because we really want to get to this point. It's really
Can I share a little something in
wait
regards?
just for a
Yeah,
moment,
please.
because we want to lay this basis first, and that is that. So when you are wanting to be a deliberate creator, and you are sifting through contrast and knowing what you don't want and knowing what you do want, and establishing your idea of what you do want, the question often comes from people who are listening to us, well, how deliberate should we be? Abraham, do you want us to set goals and really identify what we want, or do you want us to just sit back and chill? You say you want us to put our feet in the water, and you want us to pet the cat, you want us to focus on allowing. So we began telling you about step 1, step 2, step 3. Step 1 is the contrast helps you to identify what you want. But if you are not a vibrational match to what you want, then you are sometimes offering resistance that does not allow what you want to flow into your experience. And so people have sort of been struggling a little bit with that. It's the basis of this question. How much contrast is of value? How much contrast do I need to really have the expansion that I want? So what we're wanting to explain here, and we think this grid conversation will make it more easy to explain, is that if you are aware that you are in the mode of attracting details that don't feel good to you when they come, you know that you are being too specific. And by that we mean you're talking too much, you're focusing too much, you're thinking too much about that subject. You're too specific. So now what you want to do is become more general. And there is nothing more general than your emotional basis. So what happens is, let us start in this other place. Esther and Mark were having a conversation. And their conversation got quite specific. And it was more specific than Esther could stay up to speed with. But she liked the idea of it. In that conversation, as it got more specific than she was ready for, it became a little uncomfortable and it felt overwhelming to her. So, in the specific conversation, Esther could feel that she was losing her alignment. Very subtle and not something very important to her, but she could feel that she was losing her alignment a little bit. So, our encouragement, when you recognize that that is happening, is to get as general as you can. So Esther goes back to the thoughts. Things are working really well. They always figure out what to do. We have a really good setup happening here. It's taking them more time to set it up than is pleasing to Esther. They are hauling a lot of equipment. A lot of people are flying in. They spend many hours before you come stringing wires and making sure that everything is working just right. And so out of all of that, Esther is always longing for a simpler setup for them. So in the specifics, when you begin to feel yourself getting out of alignment, if you go back to the general statements, such as, it's working, we'll figure it out as we go. In the general statement, there is less resistance always than in the specific statement. So the rule of thumb that we've been offering is be as specific as you can be and still feel good. So then we notice, and you notice too, that when you're general for very long, first of all, is sort of a not very important point to discuss, because you can't hold yourself general for very long, because the grid will begin to fill in with more specifics. But as you go general, and you feel good while you are general, and we'll talk more about that if you want more specifics, the grid begins to fill in with more specifics that feel good, like the general grid that you've established. And then, as you focus upon those specifics in a more general way, with your emotional ear to the ground, that you want to feel good while you're being more specific, then more specifics come. So the answer to your question is, when you're really
all the while back there I knew what I was going to say, and now it's all fuzzy.
Well,
But-
we were buying you a little extra time
Yeah.
there.
So I have this situation, and a lot of what you said today I can apply, but I feel like I need to ask the specifics so that it can be very clear.
You know what, though? If you get really specific about a situation, it doesn't matter how clear we are, your specifics about the situation will keep you from hearing our brilliant answer. You have a better chance of hearing the solution if we don't get too specific about the specifics of the situation.
Okay, I'll be as general as I can. So I have this huge family crisis between my husband and my mother. And-
Divorce both of them.
Well, it's close to that point, and it's been going on for months, and I'm not going to go through the details of the events, but the result is I'm now separated from my husband, and I have a very strained relationship with my mother.
Because being in the middle of their tug of war, you are not in alignment with who you are, so you can't think clearly.
Yes, I feel that.
And you blame both of them for how you feel.
So I'm kind of at this place now where
Well, what do you think? Do you think the resolution is they have to get along before you can feel better? Because if that's the case, too bad.
no,
This is a triad that was lined up before any of you came into your physical bodies, because what you're showing each other, and you may be the only one who gets it, it really is for you. Unconditional love is, and such boring words we know, but unconditional love is being able to stay in the vortex regardless of the condition. Conditional love says, when you two get along, because I love you and I love you, when you love each other, I feel so good. I love you and I love you, and when you love each other, I feel so good. But I can't control those conditions, and you're really mad at each other. You don't love each other. So my logic says, when you love each other, then I feel good, but when you don't love each other, then I feel bad. So I'm giving you the power to how I feel. And what you're going to teach me is that I'm so sick of it, that I am so tired of being tired. I'm so tired of being out of the vortex. I'm so tired about not being able to control this that I'm giving up. I'm letting go of the control of the uncontrollable. Finally, you have convinced me to give up control of the uncontrollable. And in the process, I'm going to apply the only control I really have, which is my alignment with who I am. But for me to be in alignment with who I really am, I have to love you and I have to love you. Never mind that you don't love each other. I have to find the vortex version of you. It's so interesting because these two, perhaps more than a lot of other things that you've lived through your life experience, these two have caused you to put more into your vortex in a short period of time than anything that you've ever encountered before. So they are the reason for dramatic expansion, and their behavior is also the reason that you're not in the vortex having the expansion. That's why you're extra mad at them. So if you could just appreciate them for the expansion and not be mad at them because their behavior is holding you out of the vortex, now you're in the vortex, you're feeling great, you're appreciating them. We know you hear this conceptually,
but I'm not feeling great because I feel like I don't want to be separated from my husband, and I don't want this strained relationship with my mother, but I don't really know how to.
well, because you have to find a way of thinking about something that doesn't tear you apart. So at first, pick things that don't have anything to do with either one of them. And eventually, you'll be able to make a list of positive aspects about each of them. In other words, it's exactly the same thing that we were saying to the woman who had arthritis in her hips. You've got to find a way to feel hopeful without recovery. You've got to have this mess of a thing going on and feel hopeful, because in hopefulness there's alignment that will bring about resolution. But as long as you believe that they have to change their opinion of each other and their behavioral response to each other, you're all sort of dead in the water.
I've accepted that they'll never probably speak again in life. But I have a hard time, the demands or the requests that my husband's make, the conditions that he's putting on me in order for us to reconcile.
But here's the thing. He's putting conditions on you, not just when he's outside the vortex, but when you're outside the vortex too. In other words, we promise you, when we were offering the hypothetical of how good it feels in the vortex, and you said, but I'm not there, I don't feel good. But we want you to hear this, because you can reach the place where, even though they're behaving that way, and even though they're both issuing ultimatums to you, if there's ever someone who's been torn apart over something, it's you. But we want you to understand that you do have the ability to come into alignment even with them behaving that way.
How do I do that?
Well, we've been talking about it in general terms, and we'll get specific with you here in a minute, but we want to lay a bit more of the basis first. We want to convince you of the viability of it, and then we'll deal with the tactics of it. So, assuming that you could make your way into the vortex and practice the vibration of it long enough that you feel softer and easier, and now your husband is offering an ultimatum: never bring that person to my home again.
Exactly what he said.
But you're in the vortex. And when you're in the vortex, you're tuned in, tapped in, turned on. And you're in alignment with the best of him, not who he's being in this moment. You're in alignment with who he really is. And so the words that come from you then are inside the vortex words that sound like, well, if anybody has the right to make a decision like that, it certainly is you. I know that you care about your space and you care about how you feel. And I really get why you're feeling what you're feeling. And I gotta say, having witnessed every part of it, she has that coming big time. She has that coming big time. I don't disagree with you. And I also understand your powerful desire to maintain some semblance of a loving space, because you want to feel good. That's why I love you. You're like me. I don't know anybody that wants to feel any better than you want to feel. And so I get it why you feel protective and are wanting to guard yourself and me, us, from something that feels so toxic. I get that.
Gosh, you sound just like him. That's exactly what he says to me. He says those things.
Toxic.
Yeah, that he wants to protect our family, because we have 2 kids as well, from the toxicity of her. And I'm not because she's my mother. I'm not.
You're blind.
I'm blind and not putting the boundaries necessary.
Yes. So as you're expressing to him your understanding of why he feels that way, from your in the vortex clarity, what he will feel from you while you're not pushing against him. You're not siding with your mother. You're not pushing against him. You're in alignment with who you are and speaking with clarity. He'll feel the very thing that he's worried that you don't have. He'll feel your good judgment. He'll feel your clarity. He'll feel your harmony with what he wants. He'll feel your understanding. In other words, you'll make headway with a conversation like that. Really, you will. What's happening to you is that when he demands something of you, you get your back all up because you don't want him telling you what you can and cannot do.
Yeah, that's exactly true.
He's stepping all over your toes of freedom, you see.
Yeah.
But when you've decided to align with who you are, nobody can keep you from your alignment. That's the thing that we're wanting to convey to you. And when you are in alignment with who you are, it is our promise to you that you will evoke the best from everyone with whom you are interacting. We said to a woman one day who was having a similar situation with her husband, or maybe it was the husband who was having a similar situation with the wife. when you're in the vortex and you are unconditionally loving someone, it knocks all of their guardedness right out from under. It knocks those legs right out from under them. They melt into the understanding that you have for them. But you've got to practice that. We have to convince you. You have to be convinced that your remedy is in the vortex, and you have to decide that you're going to get there in spite of them, regardless, apart from them. You have to do this vortex work without trying to coddle or move in the direction of either one of them. And once you have found your vibrational stance, then the perfect words will flow from you relative to both of them. Nothing is worse than being in the middle. But the flaw in your reasoning is you think they are the reason that you are in the middle. And we know that you are the reason that you are in the middle. Because you have let your mother in your early life call you away from your vortex. And you have let your husband in your later life call you away from your vortex. You have convinced both of them that their happiness depends upon your allegiance and alignment with them. And now you must show yourself first and them later that your happiness is about your allegiance with your vortex, and they can be damned. And we don't mean that you don't love them. We just mean you cannot cater to demanding people and ever get them where they want to be or you where you want to be, you see. So then, you're hearing it. So then, once you come into alignment, and you will, we can feel you moving in that direction even as we were visiting. As you come into alignment, then the wisdom that comes from you. In other words, when you first come into your physical body, almost all people who approach you have this attitude. Your world will go better for you if you go along with what I say and what I think. That's what parenting for the most part is. And they're well-meaning, but they do not realize that in that whole process they're training you away from your vortex. And now here's 3 people all pulled completely away from their vortex, all miserable because no one's happy unless they are in alignment with their vortex, and all blaming each other for the misery that you're feeling, you see. You have to be the leader. You have to get into the vortex. Your heart has to soar. You have to get your balance back. This whole thing has to start being funny to you. You have to start recognizing that this is like a dramatic Shakespeare play playing out right in the middle of your own living room.
That's what it feels like.
You have to reach this place where you are so in touch with who you are that in the same way, didn't you find it rather remarkable that we know everything on your mind right down to the words that are being spoken because we're in the vortex where everything that you want is? We're communicating with you in very clear fashion, and you will do the same for them. And you will convince each of them independently of your absolute adoration and appreciation of your vortex and your alignment, and then of your appreciation of them. And it's our promise to you. You see, when you're in the vortex, you open to this infinite love. When you're in the vortex, you have this capacity for love and appreciation. And when they see that you're not catering, that you're vortexing, that you're aligning with who you are, in time, they will come to realize that you are not to be competed over by them, that you are enough for all of it, that there is enough flowing through you and to them and to a lot of other things. You can work this out.
Well, I have one other little problem related to all of this, which is that we have these 2 young children who my husband is now adamant that they are not, that they're not able to see my
Well,
mother.
we understand that, but the thing is, don't go there now for a little while. In other words, we've had a wonderful gathering here today, and you felt yourself come into resonance with a lot of it. And as we spoke specifically to you about this very compelling and real-life situation, you came even to more alignment. And now, as you have that conversation with us or with anyone, you lose ground. In other words, as you keep saying, but he says, and she says, and he won't, and she won't, you just keep it alive within you see. And so what you want to start saying are things like, they don't really know what they're doing, and I'm going to figure this out, and I haven't got it all figured out yet, but I'm going to. And there's going to be a time in my future that we're all going to be a happy family again. I know it because I want it. I want my children to have this man, and I want these children to have this grandmother. I want that, and I will have it. I just don't have
I always have so many questions, and they always get answered whether I'm here or I'm home, listening to the CD or reading the book. And finally, I want to share with you what I do that it doesn't work for me. And it is that every time that I'm always moving forward to a better place that feels better for me in my interactions and my thoughts. And when it comes to people, when I'm around people that are close to me, like my partner, my life partner, it is so clear to me that I want to, and you said this to me, second guess myself about it. I just feel like maybe people that are so close to me, they think that I'm foolish, behaving or thinking or focusing.
All right, that may be. And as you focus on that and you feel that, what's the grid that they are helping you to create that then fills in with more evidence of it?
Well,
You see?
Yes.
You see?
I do. Because I have this conversation for many, many, many years
Yes.
going on.
Yes.
And then when I stop, then all of a sudden I said to myself, wow, now I can hear them having conversations about things or the way or how I saw a situation when we were together. And it was this side or this side, and when they were going
Well,
that side.
most everybody is too interested in what people's response to them is. It's an interesting thing. So in this school setting that we are describing, or in this world setting, or in this community setting, or whatever environment is around you, there are all kinds of people who are observing you. Of course they are. And in their observation of you, they are creating their grid. So let them do that and wish them well. But what you're wanting to do is pay attention to your observation of them, which is creating your grid. So what happens is, as you observe people who you think are disapproving of you, and they're creating their grid, now hear this, this is really, 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 really interesting and good. So they're observing you and creating a grid, and their grid's filling in maybe with your cooperative behavior. Did you hear? They're observing you, they're not approving of you, and they're creating a grid, and their grid is filling in with your response. Seems logical, doesn't it? You're observing them and maybe disapproving, and you're filling in your grid with them, and that's why you're together. But let's say they're observing you. This is good. This takes all of this into the next place of understanding, doesn't it? They're observing you and maybe not approving, maybe disapproving. And the potential of filling their grid in with you is there, but you're not observing them. You're too smart for that. You're filling in your own grid. You're creating your own grid for your own reasons. And so you're on a whole different vibrational wavelength. So they can't fill their grid in with you, and you can't fill your grid in with them, because you're on different vibrational frequencies. We cannot have ever said that clearer. You've been listening to us for a while. We've been talking about attraction in a lot of different ways. But so everybody is creating their own reality. What you want to do is approve of them even when they're not approving of you. Love them even if they're not loving you. Love unconditionally. When you love conditionally, you get hooked into their grid, and they get hooked into your grid, you see. And then you live that conditional life that you're not enjoying. That's helpful, isn't it?
Absolutely. And
So how would you go about applying that? In other words, how would you go about applying that?
well, what I want to say is that intellectually,
Well, we don't want it to be intellectual.
I know
We
that.
want it to be emotionally, and that was the
Okay,
perfect
emotional.
response, because how would you go about applying that? And the answer is you have to care about how you feel more than anything else. And when you care about how you feel, then you're going to do the grid work, you see. You want to love them, We have a question for all of you, and just answer it as you feel inspired to do so. There's no right or wrong answer. At least we're telling you that until we get the wrong answer, and then we're going to nail you for it. When someone doesn't approve of you, do you care? Well, when someone doesn't approve of you, and if you are one who said you do care, how do you feel in their disapproval? So if you feel bad in their disapproval, what kind of grid are you establishing in this new 17 seconds? And then what's it going to fill in with? More of their disapproval. So if someone's disapproving of you and you feel bad and you want to create a different grid, what do? Do you try to get their approval? You do. You try to, but you can't. You do. You try to, but you can't, because no matter how hard you try, you can't, because you got a different grid going on. So what choice do you have? What is the only choice? You got to let go of it. You've got to sort of break the cycle of it by going general. So why do you think you wanted their approval to begin with? Because it would feel better if they gave you the approval. And what is their approval? What does their approval represent to you? Their love, their appreciation, their alignment. So if you go right to love and appreciation and alignment and leave them out of it because they're out there having their own experience, whatever it is, and you find love and approval and alignment anyway, unconditionally, because the condition didn't encourage it. You had to do it unconditionally. You had to do it unspecifically. You had to do it some different way. You did the grid work. You found the love because you want to feel the love. You want to be the love. You want to radiate the love. You want to attract the love. Now what are you going to get from them? Maybe love if they're in the vicinity. And we're here to tell you all of them are in the vicinity enough to get it if you would practice it enough. There's not a rascally enough person on this planet to withhold their love from you if you love them enough. Not one of them can deny you, you see. Because when you get into this grid, when you align with the wholeness of who you are, you have such power, you have such leverage, you have so much wholeness with who you are, that when you are radiating that, they will come around. They will come around. They will come around. They might have to croak to do it, but they will come around. They will come around. And in the meantime, you won't suffer the out of the vortexness that they have inspired because you are maintaining your own alignment with who you are. That's the best definition that we've ever given of unconditional love. It's the best reason we've ever given for wanting to discover unconditional love. You are unconditional love. It's the basis of who you are. And anything less than that is such a deviation from who you are, you can't stand it, you see. It isn't fun not to be loved, but the reason that it isn't fun not to be loved is because when somebody's not loving you, you're usually not loving them, and you can't stand not to love because the basis of you is love, you see. You thought it was about something altogether different. You've been looking for love in all the wrong places, but when you find it, you'll find it in all the places, you see. When you are love, it must come to you everywhere that you are. It will come in the most illogical of fashion. It will come in places that you didn't expect it to show up. And when it comes in those surprising ways, that's when you really enjoy it the most, you see. That's when you find your true worthiness and power. This is good.
So as I move through my life, and I find myself that I'm listening to you here right now, and I know that it's not that I want them to love me because I know I'm loved, but it's also that I want them, for lack of better words, I don't want them to stay behind because I feel so much better every day of my life when I'm aware, when I'm in alignment, that I'm loved, that everybody does it, and then I don't want them to feel like they're falling behind. So I say I'm not going to talk about it.
But that's why we're saying to you, from our perspective, they're all in exactly the right place, and the school's just fine, and the government is too, and nothing's going wrong. And the rightness is so much better than any wrongness. And the contrast is serving us all so magnificently well. And nothing's broken. And nothing needs to be fixed. And evolution is happening, and expansion is inevitable, and joy is natural, and freedom is the basis of all of it. And you're so free that you can choose how you feel in any moment. And as you choose on purpose and then watch what feels in, and then choose deliberately and watch what feels in, you begin to understand that it's all right. And more of them will find it, but it's all right even if they don't. It's all right if they don't find it in this moment. If they're looking, it is our promise to you that they will find it, you see. And it is also our promise to you that they are all looking. So, whether it will be something that converges in this moment with you or not is really not so important. But your knowledge that it will converge for them is important. It's what our friend said earlier. He wants to, what would the world be like if everyone could find that, you see? And we say, it's what the world is like, because at the basis of what everyone is this love and is this worthiness. It's why you're all here. You couldn't be here participating and playing in this magnificent adventure of motion forward and joyous expansion if you were not in the right place at the right time, you see. Nothing is going wrong. But it's time for you to have more fun in the process. It's time for you to lighten up and let more of your moments be convergence moments where wonderful things are happening to you. And we really want to say to you, you have all been doing one thing primarily, even those of you, or maybe even especially those of you who have been listening to us for a number of years and who are wanting to
Top to bottom of the country, New Zealand's most trusted drenchers have got you and your stock covered because the Degree work shirt is back and you can score a pair of Canterbury work shorts to keep your bottom half looking as sharp as your top. Yours with selected products while stocks last.
The clock, that is wrong. The word apology comes from what classical language? See?
Greek. I would say Greek. Apology. Yeah.
Go Greek. Greek is right. Well played, push the chaser back. 12 to catch. The time starts again now. When We Were Orphans is a novel by which Japanese-born writer?
Murakami?
Stop the clock. That is wrong. Now then, take your time. Here we go. When We Were Orphans is a novel by which Japanese-born writer?
I don't know any Japanese authors. Just say it.
Yoko Ono. No, bad luck. Hit the post for that. It was Katsuo Ishiguro.
Oh, of course.
Okay, 12 to catch. Here we go. Your time starts again. Now, Harvest Moon is a North American variety of what dairy product? Cheese. Correct. What beauty company makes Skin So Soft body lotion?
Avon.
Correct. All of Sheryl Crow's top 10 hits were in what decade?
The 1990s.
Correct. Lady Lever Art Gallery is in what model village on the Wirral?
Port Sunlight.
Correct. What term for a yearly payment can be abbreviated PAE?
Per annum.
Correct. What sort of flying insect is the Laguna Mountain skipper?
Butterfly.
Correct. How many novels did Margaret Mitchell publish in her lifetime?
1.
Correct. La Doire is a type of what alcoholic drink?
Wine.
Correct. Fianchetto is a strategy in what board game?
Chess.
Correct. 2017, Foo Fighters headlined what Somerset Music Festival?
Glastonbury.
Correct. What's the name of Dante Gabriel Rossetti's poet's sister?
Christina.
Correct. Abernethy biscuits come from what country of the UK? Scotland. Correct. those developments.
Trapped at sea for a fortnight. Cabin fever and frustrations already kicking in.
We haven't been asked any more questions. Have we got a cough? Have we got a fever? Are we taking any medication to reduce our temperatures? That has not happened for days.
12 New Zealanders are on board the Diamond Princess, floating near Yokohama. The Kiwi is among the 61 passengers now confirmed to have the coronavirus, now in hospital with the New Zealand government closely monitoring.
We can't talk to anybody because we are confined to the cabins. I haven't actually met on the 2-week cruise anybody from New Zealand. There's a few Australians, a handful of Brits.
Another New Zealander is quarantined on this cruise ship in Hong Kong after 8 passengers tested positive. Nearby, there were tussles in a supermarket for food as fears grow of a border closure. And at Ground Zero in Wuhan, the containment efforts escalating, with officials going door to door rounding up the infected and bringing them to places like this. One of the latest to be killed by the virus is this man, Dr. Li Wenliang, who late last year attempted to alert authorities. Officials from China today insisting the outbreak is under control.
It is our hope that the governments of all countries, including the UK, should understand and support China's efforts, avoid the overreaction, avoid creating panic.
As scientists around the world rush to develop a vaccine, the World Health Organization is urging countries to put more money into the cause.
Shadow boxes. Need to bring this
flood-ravaged homes. The last of the 3 towns evacuated has been reopened, ending days of uncertainty for residents. One News reporter Thomas Mead was with families in Matoda as they made their way home.
It's the sight the residents of Matoda had feared. A town underwater, its streets turned murky brown, homes inundated, the water lapping right up to and over the doorstep.
Devastation here. It's just a lot of water and we can't get back into our house at the moment.
After 2 days locked out, locals like Graham and Shirley Wilkins could finally get inside. Their pride and joy, now a swimming pool.
That's where the levels come up to there.
While outside of the yard, the water was half a metre high.
Yeah, sorry, it's just a bit hard, much to take in.
A few streets over, locals were forced to carry their food in, while others grabbed a few things to take away.
We're all here to help each other. Yeah, we're a good community like that.
The problem with this water is that it may be contaminated. Nobody knows what's in it. But the only way for these residents to go to the homes that they've been away from is to take the risk and push on forward regardless. Pets a big worry too. We joined Zoe Miles in a search for her family cat. There was no time to gather her during the evacuation, the family fearing the worst.
Oh, baby girl, come here. Come on. Oh, she's wet. Yeah, all right. Come on, Kenya.
The 6-year-old Oriental shivering and covered in oil, but okay.
Shaken but not stirred.
The work to clear the road started immediately with pumps and diggers, but many couldn't wait. Robert Bastianson and his family heading straight in. Their house okay, but the man cave was a different story.
Stuff on the floor has all been washed out from where they were, so there must have been quite a bit of water in here.
The carpet and a prize record collection saturated.
Oh well, nothing you can do.
But not all was lost.
Oh, the beer's still cold, that's good.
The clean-up may be a long one, but here in Matoda, they know how to take things in their stride. Thomas Mead, One News.
And the torrential rain that battered the Fiordland region earlier this week has forced the closure of 2 of the country's great walks. The Routeburn track will be shut off for the foreseeable future, following significant damage to its bridges, huts and tracks. The Milford track will also be closed for at least 3 weeks, while the Department of Conservation assesses what repairs are needed. DOC says all workers who have booked to hike the tracks will be refunded.
Urgent warnings have been sent to pilots around the world after the safety of the runway at Auckland Airport. That's after 2 recent closures disrupted hundreds of flights and thousands of passengers at a huge cost to airlines. As Katie Bradford reports, the government's now warning enough is enough.
An urgent safety warning about the gateway to New Zealand.
Pieces of concrete that are coming out of this runway are not small. They are endangering aircraft, and it needs some urgent plan.
Auckland Airport's runway has been closed twice in the past fortnight. Air New Zealand said at least a dozen flights and thousands of passengers were affected yesterday alone.
Business that is a monopoly, and I fear it's actually a millionaire's club, that cannot maintain the confidence of international pilots or international airlines is an indictment on New Zealand.
The International Federation of Airline Pilots has sent out a warning and says pilots landing there should have contingency plans.
Only if they consider it to be a safety issue would they issue a safety bulletin like they did last night.
500 flights a day jet in and out of Auckland Airport. That's about 180,000 flights a year. But since 2018, the runway has been closed 4 times for more than 15 minutes. That's just due to runway maintenance.
If they get on and get this runway fixed, it's important infrastructure for New Zealand. It's important for us from a safety perspective.
The airport has now launched an urgent review.
No one from Auckland Airport would be interviewed on camera despite repeated requests from One News. Sources, though, say airlines are increasingly frustrated with its behaviour, that in their view the airport's more concerned with shareholders' profits than safety and reliability.
In recent years, the airport has undergone a multi-million-dollar facelift with new retail and dining outlets.
I suspect they're eating the profit like a horse and making a pig out of our country's reputation.
Shane Jones is sending a warning.
In my view, we should be taking forward necessary measures to regulate them.
The airport promising to complete its review within 3 weeks, but pilots say even that is too long. Katie Bradford, One News.
Workers started on a business case looking at the possibility of combining TVNZ and Radio New Zealand into a mega public media organisation. Broadcasting Minister Chris Farfoy made the announcement at the Christchurch Broadcasting School today.
It would have a mixed funding model with revenue from the Crown and non-Crown sources and would operate as a not-for-profit. But I want to make very clear that current commercial-free platforms will continue to be commercial-free.
The report is expected to be completed by the middle of the year. The new entity could be formed by 2023 if given the green light.
A prominent Auckland businessman's pleaded not guilty to breaching a suppression order for the man who murdered Grace Millane. 63-year-old Leo Malloy, who owns Headquarters Restaurant on the Viaduct, is the first person to be charged by New Zealand police after numerous suppression breaches during and after the trial. A 27-year-old man was found guilty of murdering the British backpacker in Auckland after a 3-week trial last November.
There's concern taps in some Northland towns will run dry by the end of the month if drought conditions continue. Water levels are critically low and the toughest water restrictions have been imposed. Helen Castles has more.
Tanks at the ready for when the taps won't do the job. These 30,000-litre storage tanks newly installed in Kaikohe.
We'll get water from wherever source we can, fill those tanks up, and then people will be able to come and get their containers filled and take them to their houses. So that's, as I say, that's an extreme.
If we have to do that, then we have to do that.
The drought index shows conditions have worsened in the last month, and there's no rain expected for weeks.
Mid-month and the second half of February, if we're looking for any meaningful rain across the upper North Island, including Northland, it'll likely come from the north. What we don't want is too much rain at once. We'll have to wait and see if that happens.
Level 4 water restrictions, the highest that can be imposed, are in place around the region. This means a complete ban on all outdoor water use. Residential water use restricted to drinking, cooking and washing only.
It's as bad as I can ever remember, and I've been here for most of my life.
The rivers feeding the town supplies in Kaikohe and Kaitaia are almost dry, and the council has breached its maximum use. And a stop on water companies drawing a local supply is having an effect.
We haven't been able to draw water from Kaikohe since October, which means we have to go a lot further, and hence it takes a lot longer to get the deliveries done. It has pushed the prices up as well.
Customers with medical issues are being prioritised for deliveries. Kaikohe schools are looking at ways to conserve water, and some of the ideas being discussed includes reducing the school week to just 4 days and bringing in portaloos. The Education Ministry has issued guidance to schools in affected areas. A meeting with the council and civil defence takes place next week to get a full assessment of the region's needs. Helen Castles, One News.
And from one extreme to another, rain finally falls in fire-ravaged Australia, bringing a much-needed boost for some.
Coming back down to Earth and setting a new record along the way, the history-making mission astronaut Christina Cook has just completed.
Plus, go backstage at the Oscars as producers spill secrets ahead of next week's Academy Awards.
And then later on 7 Sharp, you're catching up with an old friend, Hillary.
We certainly are. Richie McCaw is with us, but was there really any need for Jeremy to dress like this for the interview? Oh, dog!
I mean, what am I wearing? What?
That is why you
What, this microphone?
Stop putting your hand up there.
It's cold outside.
Plus a story you won't want to miss. If you want to save your family from a house fire, join us tonight at 7.
Spend your Friday evening with One. First up, there's a lot to rejoice over on X Factor Celebrity. I've never seen her smile like this. Then return to the street with another fresh dose of Coro. That's tonight on One.
The truth is you're not here for the right reasons.
This week, the massive shock is revealed.
You won't be joining us in Argentina.
Find out who's going home. The Bachelorette New Zealand, Sunday at 7 and continues Monday to Wednesday on 2.
If you can see this ad, it doesn't mean that your eyes are healthy. But that's because a number of eye health issues aren't noticeable until they're fairly advanced. Luckily, 90% of sight loss is avoidable if it's detected early enough, thanks in part to this thing. Right, Ian?
Correct. So this advanced machine takes a 3D scan to give us a detailed understanding of your eye health and help us detect early signs of eye disease. And we're included in every eye test and every Specsavers at no extra charge.
The on sale with Hello World Travel. Treat the kids to a family holiday in Fiji from $6.99 per person flying Air New Zealand. Or enjoy an escape for two at the Western Dinera Island from $1,299 per person. Contact Hello World Travel today.
I'd like a bar of chocolate, please. Happy birthday, Mum.
There's a glass and a half in everyone. Hiya, Ben. Heard about Pumped? You get 6 cents off a litre every day. Plus, you can earn flybys or air points too.
That's got to be pumped. Just scan your Caltex app, flybys or air points to save on fuel and earn rewards every day. Caltex, it's a local thing.
There's always a way to save every day at New World. Get weekly super savers like fresh beef ribeye, $28.99 a kilo. Scan your club card for L&P bottles, $1 each. And find everyday value with canned tomatoes, 69 cents each. New World. Enjoy better.
Arthritic